it's Coach Justin from Ultimate Baseball Training. Welcome back to another video. And over the past few years, I've had a lot of young hitters ask me to take a look at their swings. And so over this time period, I've really seen what a lot of young hitters do well, and then a lot of mistakes that are common across the board with young hitters too. And so in today's video, I wanted to share with you 5 big mistakes that I see all the time with a lot of hitters, and I wanted to share these with you so hopefully you can avoid them in your swing and really hit the ball more consistently and harder and further. So I think this video is going to be really valuable to you. Without further ado, let's jump into it. That I see with a lot of hitters is when they get into their stance, they become still as a statue, all right? And there's a couple problems with this. The first problem is you've probably heard that an object in motion tends to stay in motion, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest, right? And so when you step into the batter's box and you get completely still as a statue like this in your stance, it becomes much harder for you to get your momentum going for your load, right? We have a load, we have a gather, a weight shift back, right? That's really the first movement of our swing is we load, obviously, right, to then stride forward. And, you know, if you're sitting at rest, if you're still as a statue, it's gonna make it very, very hard for you to start getting that momentum, right? So that's the first reason. And the next reason is you get really, really tense when you do that. So just try it at home, you know, get into your stance and just try to stay as still as possible, right? Like you can't move at all. Just try to stay over-exaggerated, stay still as possible, and do that for 30 seconds or so. And you're gonna notice how uncomfortable and how tense that you get when you do that, right? And so plenty of times it happens when you step into the batter's box, right? And the pitchers, they take a little bit longer to get their sign. So if you're staying nice and loose and relaxed, you're totally fine with that. It doesn't really matter, right? Because you're loose, you're relaxed, you're ready to roll. He can be up there for 2 minutes getting his sign, right? And then when he's ready, I'm ready, you know? But if you step into the batter's box and you just get still as a statue, and he takes a long time for him to get his sign and then actually get ready to deliver the pitch, by the time that he winds up and by the time it's too late to call time, you're not gonna be ready to hit. So try to avoid being still as a statue in the box. You don't have to have a ton of movement, right? I'm talking a little bit of movement. It can be something like this, you know, pre-pitch something like this, or you can have the bat up here like this and wiggle your fingers, have a little bit of a bat waggle. You can have the handle resting kind of on your neck here, right? Just back and forth a little bit. More like Robinson Cano, just back and forth a little bit. You don't have to be moving all over the place, because the more you move, the more your head moves. And you don't have to, in fact, I don't recommend, you don't have to wag your bat like this, but just a little bit of movement so it's easier to transition into your load. So the next mistake that I see that's very common with young hitters is too small of a stride. And this is the perfect angle to see this at. So a lot of the times what you see is a lot of times it's with kids with, you know, a narrower stance to begin with. And what they do is they go into their weight shift back, their load, and then they only stride, you know, about this far. So they maybe pick their foot up and put it down like this. The problem with this is kind of twofold. Number one, this here doesn't really generate any momentum, right? This doesn't generate any momentum. But number two, and the bigger problem, is it gets you into a pretty poor hitting position. Let me ask you this, what do we hit with? Do we hit with our hands? Do we hit with our wrists? Do we hit with our forearms? Sure, they're part of it, right? But no, where does power come from? It comes from our big muscles, it comes from our legs. And so when we take a short stride like this, we are unable to really sink down into a good launch position where we're utilizing all of our power that our legs are generating, right? We don't sink down into a good launch position, so we're not using our legs. We're pretty much hitting with our upper body, right? And then a lot of times these hitters, they'll make contact with the ball and they'll be way too upright like this. Their angle of their back leg here, instead of being like 110 degrees or less, way up tall like this. They're not doing a good job at really staying back and hitting against a firm front side and having this good L shape going on here, okay? And so you want to be careful when teaching this. You don't want players to overstride, but a good rule of thumb is when I don't care how narrow your stance is to start. It doesn't matter if your feet are literally right next to each other or if you've got a stance like Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols doesn't have a big stride. He just lifts up his front heel and puts it back down. But when he gets to his launch position, which is technically when your front foot lands, right? The rule of thumb is you want the distance between your feet to be about the same distance as your inseam. Another great way to look at it is put your baseball bat, this works with most hitters, put your baseball bat on the ground in between your feet, and the distance between your feet should be about the distance between your baseball bat, okay? So when you do take an appropriate stride like that, what that allows you to do is it allows you to really see automatically I'm sunk down lower to the ground, as opposed to up here like this. I'm automatically sunk down lower to the ground. I'm engaging my legs. My front foot lands slightly open, about 45 degrees. I'm in a really good launch position, ready to explode on the baseball. So make sure to avoid the short stride. We don't want to overstride, but we definitely want to get to a good stride length that gets us into a good launch position where we can actually use our legs and hit for more power.